Most killers try to hide. They avoid attention. They destroy evidence. They disappear into the crowd and hope the world never notices them. The Zodiac Killer did the opposite. He sent letters to newspapers. He gave himself a name. He invented a symbol, a circle with a crosshair, through the center, and signed it onto every communication. He demanded that his letters be published on front pages. He taunted the police in print. He threatened to kill children. And then, as suddenly and as mysteriously as he had appeared, he vanished, leaving behind 5 confirmed murders, a string of coded messages, and one of the most enduring, unsolved mysteries in American history. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer, a man who turned murder into performance, who made the entire state of California his audience, and who, more than 50 years later, has never been identified. The story begins not in darkness, but on a clear winter evening in December of 1968 in Vallejo, California, a quiet city in the San Francisco Bay Area, the kind of place where nothing much ever happened. David Faraday was 17 years old. Betty Lou Jensen was 16. They were on one of their first dates together, and they had driven out to a remote spot on Lake Herman Road, a secluded stretch known locally as a lover's lane, the kind of place teenagers had been parking for decades. They had no reason to be afraid. There was no reason on that night to believe that anything unusual was about to happen. At around 11 o'clock in the evening, a car pulled up beside them. The driver got out. He fired a single shot through the rear window of David's Rambler. Then he shot David in the head at point-blank range. Betty Lou ran. He shot her 5 times in the back as she fled. She collapsed on the road and died where she fell. The police arrived to find 2 teenagers dead. No witnesses, no motive, and no suspects. It appeared, at first glance, to be a random act of violence. A robbery gone wrong, perhaps, or a chance encounter with someone dangerous. The investigation turned up nothing. The case went cold. 7 months later, it happened again. On the 4th of July, 1969, a 22-year-old woman named Darlene Ferrin and her 19-year-old boyfriend, Michael Mageau, were sitting in a parked car at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, less than 4 miles from where David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen had been killed the previous December. A car pulled up. A man got out. He walked toward them with a flashlight and a gun. He shot them both. Then he walked back to his car, drove away, and stopped at a payphone a short distance from the park. He called the Vallejo Police Department. He told the dispatcher, in a calm and deliberate voice, that he wanted to report a double murder. He gave the location. He told them to check the previous murders on Lake Herman Road as well, because he was responsible for those too. Then he hung up. Darlene Ferrin died from her injuries. Michael Mageau survived, barely. He described his attacker as a stocky man in his late 20s or early 30s wearing glasses, who had seemed almost calm, almost polite, as if shooting 2 people in a parked car was simply something he had decided to do that evening. 3 weeks later, on the 1st of August, 1969, 3 Bay Area newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, each received a letter. The letters were nearly identical. They claimed responsibility for both attacks in Vallejo and the murders on Lake Herman Road. They provided details that only the killer could have known. The brand of ammunition used, the number of shots fired, the exact position of the bodies. And each letter contained 1/3 of a cipher, a coded message made up of symbols, letters, and strange combinations of characters. If you put the 3 pieces together, you had a 408-symbol cryptogram. The sender told the newspapers They had to publish his letters on the front page. If they did not, he wrote, he would go on a killing rampage that weekend. He did not yet use a name. That was about to change. On the 4th of August, another letter arrived at the San Francisco Examiner. This one began, "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." It was the first time those words had ever been written, and they would echo across America for the next 50 years. The 3 newspapers published the letters. They also published the 3 pieces of the cipher, now combined into a single 408-symbol cryptogram. The police, the FBI, and the CIA all attempted to break the code. None of them succeeded. It was solved within a week by 2 private citizens. Donald Hardin was a high school teacher in Salinas, California. His wife Betty was a former cryptologist. Together they sat down with the cipher and began working through it systematically. Betty made a critical assumption that a killer who described murder as his hobby would almost certainly use the word kill somewhere in the message. She was right. Using the word kill as an entry point, what cryptographers call a crib, they began to unlock the rest of the cipher. Within days, they had cracked it. The decoded message was chilling. The Zodiac wrote, in his own words, that he liked killing people because it was so much fun. He compared murdering humans to hunting animals, saying that man was the most dangerous prey of all. He said that killing gave him a thrill that nothing else could match. And then he said something that revealed the full extent of his twisted worldview. He believed that when he died, he would be reborn in paradise, and that all the people he had killed would become his slaves in the afterlife. He was not just collecting victims. He believed he was collecting souls. The message did not contain his name, but the Zodiac was not finished. On the 27th of September, 1969, he attacked again, this time at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking by the water when a hooded figure approached them. The man wore a black hood over his head, with a circle and crosshair symbol drawn on the bib in white. He tied them up, spoke to them calmly, and then stabbed them both repeatedly with a hunting knife. Brian Hartnell survived despite being stabbed 8 times in the back. Cecilia Shepard died from her injuries 2 days later. Before he left, the Zodiac wrote on the door of Brian Hartnell's car with a felt-tip pen. He listed the dates of his previous attacks, described them as his work, and added the date of this new attack beneath them. It was signed with his symbol. 2 weeks later, on the 11th of October 1969, a taxi driver named Paul Stein was shot in the head in the Presidio Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. The Zodiac had taken a piece of Stein's shirt as a trophy. He would later send strips of it to the newspapers to prove he had been there. 3 witnesses saw the killer walking away from the scene. 2 police officers stopped a man matching the description nearby and were waved past him by a dispatcher who incorrectly described the suspect as a black man. The killer they had just walked past was white. He disappeared into the dark. After the murder of Paul Stein, the Zodiac's letters became darker, more threatening, and more elaborate. He wrote to say he had been standing just feet away from the police officers who had searched for him. He described the encounter in detail, as if it had been the best moment of his week. He mocked them. He told them they would never catch him because he was too clever for them. And then he threatened to shoot out the tires of a school bus and, as the children came stumbling out, pick them off one by one. The city of San Francisco was in a state of controlled panic. Parents were terrified. Schools tightened security. Women refused to take taxis alone. The police were receiving hundreds of tips a day and following almost none of them to any useful conclusion. Detective Inspector Dave Toschi, the lead investigator on the Stein murder, worked the case with obsessive dedication, but every lead seemed to dissolve into nothing. In November 1969, the Zodiac sent another cipher. This one contained 340 symbols. It was more complex than the first, and it defeated every attempt to decode it, by the police, by the FBI, by professional cryptographers, by the Naval Intelligence Command, and by an army of amateur codebreakers who spent decades trying. For 51 years, the Z340 remained unsolved. Then, in December 2020, a team of 3 amateur codebreakers, David Oranchak, a software developer in Virginia, Jarl van Eyck, a Belgian developer, and Sam Blake, an Australian mathematician, finally cracked it. They had built a custom program that ran over 650,000 possible solutions before arriving at the key. The decoded message revealed no new clues about the killer's identity. Instead, it was more taunting, more arrogance, more performance. The Zodiac wrote that he hoped the police were having fun trying to catch him. He said he was not afraid of the gas chamber. He called himself the Zodiac in the decoded text itself, confirming that this cipher, at least, was genuine. 2 of the Zodiac's ciphers, the Z13 and the Z32, each containing only a handful of symbols, remain unsolved to this day. Some researchers believe they may be unbreakable due to their short length. Others believe they contain his name, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone smart enough to find it. The letters continued through 1970 and into 1971. Some were playful, some were threatening, some were strange, to the point of incoherence. He claimed to have invented a bomb. He sent diagrams. He demanded that people wear buttons with his symbol on them. He complained in one letter that nobody was wearing the buttons he had requested. The tone shifted constantly from menace to mockery to something that felt almost like boredom. And then, in 1974, the letters stopped entirely. The investigation into the Zodiac Killer was, by any measure, one of the most intensive in California history. Multiple police departments, the FBI, and thousands of hours of detective work were all dedicated to finding one man. And yet, across 5 decades, no arrest was ever made. There have been dozens of serious suspects. 3 stand above the rest. The first and most frequently cited is Arthur Lee Allen. Allen was a former schoolteacher from Vallejo who had been dismissed from his job under suspicious circumstances. He was known to wear a Zodiac brand watch, the same brand as the killer's symbol. He had made comments to friends before the murders began about hunting human beings. He had the right physical description. He had connections to the locations where the murders took place. He was interviewed multiple times, and his home and vehicles were searched on multiple occasions. And yet, nothing. His handwriting did not match the Zodiac's letters. His fingerprints did not match prints found at the crime scene. A DNA sample extracted from the back of the stamps on the Zodiac's envelopes did not match Allen. He died in 1992. Still a suspect. Still unproven. The second major suspect is Gary Francis Post, a house painter who died in 2018. In 2021, a group of investigators called the Case Breakers announced they believed Post was the Zodiac. They pointed to scars on his forehead that matched eyewitness descriptions, and they claimed to have found the Zodiac's name hidden as an anagram within the ciphers, using letters from Post's full name. Several people came forward claiming Post had admitted to the murders. Law enforcement reviewed the evidence and rejected it. The FBI continues to list the case as unsolved. A third line of investigation has focused on a 2023 documentary series that proposed the murders were committed by multiple people rather than a single killer, pointing to the inconsistencies in the attacks, the different weapons used, the different victim types, and the different methods. Most mainstream criminologists do not accept this theory, but it illustrates just how wide open the case remains. The DNA extracted from the Zodiac's envelopes and stamps has never matched any sample in any database. There is hope that advances in forensic genealogy, the technique used to catch the Golden State Killer in 2018, could eventually produce a result. The San Francisco Police Department has said it is exploring this possibility. What do we actually know about this man? The physical descriptions from survivors and witnesses paint a picture of a stocky, heavy-set man, somewhere between his late 20s and mid-40s, with light-colored hair and glasses. He was intelligent enough to construct ciphers. He was organized enough to carry out multiple attacks in different locations without leaving usable forensic evidence. He was bold enough to call the police from a payphone after one of his murders and to write to 3 newspapers simultaneously. He was theatrical, narcissistic, and obsessed with attention. He wanted to be famous. He wanted to be remembered. He got exactly what he wanted. The Zodiac Killer committed his confirmed murders across a period of less than a year, from December 1968 to October 1969. The letters continued for 5 more years. And then, there was nothing. What happened to him? The most commonly cited theories are these. He may have died. From illness, from an accident, possibly even by suicide. He may have been imprisoned for other crimes, his true identity never connected to the Zodiac case. He may have simply stopped, for reasons known only to himself. Perhaps because the attention had become a risk, or perhaps because whatever need the killings had satisfied had run its course. Some investigators have pointed to the possibility that he moved away from California and continued killing elsewhere, his crimes attributed to unknown perpetrators in different states. No such connection has ever been conclusively established. The investigation suffered from problems that were, in part, simply the products of the time. In 1969, there was no national database of serial crimes. Multiple police departments were working the case independently and not always sharing information efficiently. Fingerprint analysis was slow and imprecise. DNA testing did not yet exist. The media attention, which might have generated useful tips, also created chaos. Thousands of false leads, copycat letters, and public hysteria that made it harder, not easier, to focus. By the time the tools existed to properly investigate the Zodiac case, the evidence had aged beyond reliable use. The stamps and envelopes contaminated. The crime scenes long since cleared, the witnesses aging and dying, but the case has never officially closed. The San Francisco Police Department still classifies it as an active investigation. The FBI continues to list it as one of the most significant unsolved cases in American history. New testing methods are explored as they become available. Every few years, a new suspect is named, a new theory is proposed, a new cipher solution is offered, and every few years, it comes to nothing. What the Zodiac Killer left behind is not just a mystery, it is a mirror. We look at the case, and we see something about ourselves, our fascination with evil, our need to understand the incomprehensible, our deep discomfort with the idea that someone can commit terrible acts and simply disappear. We want answers because the absence of answers feels like a kind of defeat. If he was never caught, it means he won. But there's another way to look at it. The Zodiac wanted to be remembered as a monster. He wanted the ciphers to define him. He wanted the symbol, the letters, the taunts to be his legacy. And they are, to a degree. But the 5 confirmed victims, David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Stein, they are also remembered. Their names are attached to this case as surely as any cipher. They were not props in a performance. They were people. 2 of the 4 ciphers remain unsolved. Somewhere in those symbols, some researchers believe, is his name. Or perhaps they contain nothing at all. Just more taunting, more performance, more noise, from a man who wanted the world to keep guessing. Maybe they are still out there, waiting to be solved. Maybe the Zodiac Killer's real name is sitting in a symbol no one has yet decoded correctly. Or maybe the answer was simpler all along, and we just never knew where to look. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more history and mystery content.